Welcome back, Fite Feeders. It is officially 2026. I hope that this start of this new year has gone very well for all of you. 2026 is going to be a great year. UFC on Paramount Plus. No more having to stream these fights, at least for my end, that is. Which means no more being exposed to jerkmate every 10 seconds and potentially getting viruses on our phones and laptops when we're trying to stream it. We get all of the fights in one spot at Paramount Plus, so very great news there. And we've got UFC 324, which is the first card of this year. We've all been waiting 6 weeks. It's been pretty bad out there, right? It's been very boring, not a lot going on. I will say it's been kind of nice getting some time, but I am so happy to be back, guys, and getting all of my picks and predictions for UFC 324 for all of you to enjoy. So let's not waste any more time. And let's dive in to my picks for UFC 324. Number one on UFC 324 card is a welterweight bout, and it's between the newcomer in Ty Miller versus Adam Fugitt. Now, Ty Miller, shout out to Ty Miller. I think he is he's definitely a young cat here, 25 years old, but his birthday, June 4th, is the same birthday as another fighter on this card, Michael Johnson. And why is that super cool? Well, it's 2 days before my birthday of June 6th. And now what's even cooler about that is Michael Johnson, born 1986. So as he enters his 40th year around the sun, I'll be entering my 30th year around the sun. So shout out to Ty Miller and shout out to Michael Johnson, my Gemini brethren here. But let's go ahead and dive in. Ty Miller is 25 years old, as I mentioned. He is 6'2" with a 77.5-inch reach, 6-0 as a pro, 0-0 in the UFC. He just got a win over Jimmy Drago by way of decision on Contender Series this past year. Miller's got 2 wins by way of KO, a 33% KO rate, 0 wins by way of submission, and then 4 wins by way of decision, giving him a 67% decision rate, and then a 33% finishing rate overall. Definitely not the highest of finishing rates, but when you consider that he's only got 6 fights, that changes things a bit, right? Taking a look at his last 4 fights, as I mentioned, got that win over Jimmy Drago, who's actually a pretty talented fighter. Was able to get the win, and I feel like pretty much dominate that fight, at least from my purview. Now, prior to that, he had a fight with Arthur Barros. Not sure how good Arthur is. Didn't really look into that one too much. It was an eye poke that ended that one pretty early on, I believe. Before that, a win over Ryan Charlebois, and then a win over Miguel Tovar. As you can see, Charlebois was a KO. Now, the veteran in Adam Fugitt. Adam is 37 years old, 6'1" with a 77-inch reach. 10-5 as a pro. He has a record of 2-3 in the UFC. 5 wins by way of knockout, a 50% KO rate for Adam Fugitt. 3 wins by way of submission, a 30% submission rate. And then 2 wins by way of decision, a 20% decision rate, giving Adam Fugitt a 80% finishing rate overall. Now, Adam Fugitt's had a tough last few outings, if you will. When we look at his losses, 3 losses by way of knockout, which is 60% of his losses overall. 1 loss by way of submission, 20% of his losses, and then 1 loss by way of decision, another 20% of his losses. His last 4 fights, he had a tough outing against Islam Dulatov back in July, which I believe was on the Poirier versus Max Holloway card. Prior to that, he got a win over Josh Quinlan by way of split decision. Prior to that, a submission loss to Mike Malott. And prior to that, a win over Yusaki Kinoshita by way of KO. Guys, this one, not too much to break down here, to be honest with you. I do think that Adam Fugitt, although has shown skills, shown a finishing ability in fights, I think that Ty Miller has some of the crispiest boxing out of fighters that I've seen kind of come off of Contender Series. He's also a very big individual for the welterweight weight class at 6'2" and then a 77.5-inch reach. To give you perspective, there's a couple guys on this card and also on UFC 325 who are middleweights that are actually smaller, not only in height, but then have like several inches less reach than what Ty Miller has and brings to the welterweight division. So calling that out, I do think that Ty Miller in this fight kind of has everything in his favor outside of the fact that he is debuting in the UFC. So there's going to be that pressure there. And Adam Fugitt could potentially say Fugitt and maybe catch Ty Miller with something and maybe just make it a harder fight than maybe he's expecting. But in my opinion, given that Adam Fugitt's kind of at that tail end of the career, 37 years old. He's had, back to, a win-loss in the UFC, 2-3 in the UFC overall. I feel like Ty Miller is primed to catch Adam Fugitt with a nice straight shot. He's got a very solid right hand. I could see him, using the 1-2 because that's also what he was able to get Ryan Charleboev. Caught him with a 1-2 clean, knocked him out. I feel like that is likely what is to happen in this fight in round 1. So I'm going Ty Miller by round 1 KO. All right, guys, the next fight, this one was a pretty tough one actually for me to figure out who I was going to go with. We got Ricky Turcios. And this is fight number 2. It's a bantamweight bout, 135 pounds. We got Ricky Turcios versus Cameron Smotherman. Hey, man, you want to get smothered, man? Ricky Turcios, 32 years old, 5'9", with a 71-inch reach. He is 12-5 as a pro. He is 2-3 in the UFC. He's got 3 wins by way of knockout, a 25% KO rate, 1 win by way of submission, an 8% submission rate, 8 wins by way of decision, a 67% decision rate, giving Ricky Turcios a 33% finishing rate overall. He has 1 loss by way of KO, a 20% KO loss rate, 1 loss by way of submission, 20% there as well, and then 3 losses by way of decision, which is 60% of his losses overall. Taking a look at Ricky Turcios in his last 4, he is 1-3 in his last 4. Lost to Bernardo Sopaj in his last one. Pretty competitive, though, in that one, although Sopaj did win by unanimous decision. Prior to that, he got subbed by Raul Rosas Jr., which, as we all have seen, Raul Rosas Jr. has kind of lived up a little bit to the hype that he's had. But before that, a win, which is his only win in his last 4, over Kevin Natividad, which was a decision by way of split decision. And then prior to that, a loss to Ayman Zahabi. Now, Cameron Smotherman, on the other hand, also in a weird position here. Shout out to Cameron Smotherman. He's got the same birthday as my girlfriend. 28 years old. He's 5'9" as well. He's got a 69-inch reach. He's going to actually have a reach disadvantage when it comes to this matchup. He is 12-6 as a pro, 1-2 in the UFC. 6 wins by way of knockout, a 50% KO rate. 1 win by way of submission, an 8% submission rate. 5 wins by way of decision, a 42% decision rate, giving Cameron Smotherman a 58% finishing rate overall. When we look at his losses, Smotherman's lost twice by way of KO, which is 33% of his losses. He's never lost by way of submission and lost all of his other fights by way of decision, giving him an 83% decision loss rate. I'm going to say, guys, that math's not mathing. So I think he may have only lost by KO twice and decision 4 times because that math is not mathing. So my apologies. But regardless, this fight's a hard one to pick because although Cameron Smotherman's a younger fighter, he is a strong fighter, but I feel like in his last few outings, he's just had some bad matchups. Obviously, the Series City fight, I picked Series City to win that one because I think City is he is a very tough fight for almost anybody in that bantamweight weight class. Just very good on the feet, very good on the ground as well. And I will say, Smotherman did have a competitive fight with him, but I think as the fight went on, we just saw Series City kind of overwhelm him with the pressure and ultimately get the win. And then when we look at the Ricky Simón loss, I know Cameron Smotherman actually stepped in on short notice there, but he just kind of got overpowered. And I think, more success as the fight went on. But in the grand scheme of things, I think he pretty much just got whooped up on by Ricky Simón and Series City. Now, prior to that, he has a big win over Jake Hadley by decision and then a win over Ryan Mandala. So he's 2-2 in his last 4. I ended up going with Cameron Smotherman here, guys, mainly because although Ricky Turcios is another Gemini brother of mine, his birthday's the day before mine. Lots of Geminis on this card. Not that you guys care, but I think that Turcios has although it seems that he has had a stronger strength of schedule in the UFC, I just think that Ricky Turcios, not as active as we've seen. I think he only got in 1 fight last year with Sopaj. He's 32 years old, which when you look at this type of weight class, 135, it probably ages even sooner for some fighters. Not that I'm saying Ricky Turcios has reached that point, but I do think that Cameron Smotherman is likely to just be a bit faster on the feet, probably going to be able to land some of the bigger shots in this matchup. But Ricky Turcios has that dog in him, right? He's got that ability to really make it a nasty and dirty, grind him out type fight, which is why I was really having a hard time, guys. I was kind of I couldn't figure out which way to go. I ultimately am going with the youthful guy here in Cameron Smotherman. Maybe he'll smother him, man. I don't know. But I do think that if you are looking at the odds, which I have to assume Turcios might be coming in at a bigger underdog, but I don't know because I don't look at the odds. But I do think that if you're a strong believer in Turcios making this an ugly fight, he has a chance of getting the W by way of making an ugly fight and winning by decision. But I think what's going to happen here, they're both going to kind of go back and forth. It's going to be a close one. I do think Smotherman's just going to get the better of the striking exchanges just due to his speed on the feet and also just being kind of a bit more youthful and maybe even stronger when it comes to maybe if they get into the clinching situations or even on the ground. But Turcios, like I said, he is a guy who can make it an ugly fight, has a chance to win this one, but I'm going Smotherman by way of decision. All right, fight number 3 is in the heavyweight division. We've got the big boys coming out. We got Josh Hokit, or Hokit, like I'm hucking a loogie, and then we got Denzel Freeman, who's got this, I don't even know what that, he's got a nice stash going there, much better than my stash, which also just want to say, if you guys are going to roast me about my beard growth, look, I have this theory that because I'm turning 30, it's going to finally grow in full. So just give me some patience, all right? And just try to be nice about it. Anyways, Josh Hokit is 28 years old, 6'1", with a 73.5-inch reach, 7-0 as a pro, 1-0 in the UFC. He's got 4 wins by way of knockout, a 57% KO rate. He's got 3 wins by way of submission, a 43% submission rate. We don't even got to go to decisions because Mr. Hokit's got a 100% finishing rate. You love to see it, especially in the heavyweight division. His last 4 fights, he's got, of course, all W's in those categories. A win over Max Jimenez by way of KO, which was his debut fight in the UFC on November 8th, if you remember. He got a big win there. Prior to that, a win on Contender Series over Guilherme Uriel, another KO there. Prior to that, a win, which I believe was in Bellator or PFL, a KO over Eric Lunsford, and then prior to that, a win over Ezekiel Latu by way of submission. Now, his adversary, on the other hand, Denzel Freeman, is 34 years old, 6'2", with a 77.5-inch reach, so he is going to have a significant reach advantage here. He is 7-1 as a pro, 1-0 in the UFC, got a pretty lackluster win in his debut outing, but was the opponent or the person I picked to win that fight and ended up getting it done. Freeman's got 4 wins by way of knockout, a 57% KO rate. He's got 1 win by way of submission, a 14% submission rate, and 2 wins by way of decision, a 29% decision rate, giving him a 71% finishing rate overall. And the only loss in Denzel Freeman's career came by way of decision, and which means he's never been finished. And what's fun about that in this matchup, guys, is if one of these guys ends up getting, finished, then it'll be the first of their career, would also be the first loss of Hokit's career should he lose. Now, when I look at the last 4 fights for Freeman, I do think you could argue he's had the much stronger strength of schedule. Got the win over Merrick Boujelo, who was also a debutant, as they say, who got released afterwards. But then he got a win over Hugo Cunha, and he went over Steven Asplund, Minnesota's finest, one of my favorite heavyweights that came off Contender Series this year. And him and Hokit have kind of been jawing back and forth on X. So will be interesting to see, because I know Asplund actually said, ain't no way Hokit gets through Freeman. And if he does, then I think that they're trying to have a collision course together should Hokit get it done. Prior to that, though, Freeman suffered his first loss to Isaiah Pinson. So, guys, this matchup's a tough one, because if you know that Hokit's got the background in, not only was he like on the practice squad for the 49ers, he also had a collegiate wrestling run at Fresno State, I believe it was. So definitely a strong wrestler. Something that I really like about Hokit's game, guys, is he goes out there with intensity. He's an intense guy. It's weird because when you watch interviews with him and stuff, he seems to be super nice, but when he's in the cage and even on the way to the cage, the guy is very intense. And he's in there for business. He's not in there to fucking pussyfoot around. He wants to go out there and he wants to hurt his opponent in any way he can. I do think when I compare that style to that of Denzel Freeman also, I think, has some collegiate wrestling accolades. Also very, kind of solid all over. He was throwing like switch kicks against Boujelo. So he's got some of those unique striking elements to his game. But I do think, based on just previous performances, I don't see Freeman getting Josh Hokit or into any type of submission where he's able to actually get it done that way. And in fact, I feel like Josh Hokit's going to go out there, guys. He's going to have that intense style. He's going to be pressuring Freeman. The one thing that Freeman, I think, has over Hokit, of course, is, just a little bit of that height advantage, but also that significant reach advantage. But I do think that Hokit fights in a way where he closes distance very quickly. I also love the way, especially on Contender Series, where his opponent was against the cage, trying to stay against the cage. Hokit literally planted his foot on the cage and pushed the two of them away towards the center of the octagon so he could get that takedown and get the space away from the cage, which I think is very high level. And Hokit trains out of the Jackson Wink Academy. And so I just think that Josh Hokit, guys, he seemed to be falling in love with the hands. I think he goes out there and he tests the chin of Freeman. I think he catches Freeman with something big, puts his lights out, gets a round 1 KO. Could be wrong, though, guys, because like I said, Freeman never been KO'd. And the two of these guys pretty much have styles that I think will make this a fun fight where neither guy should have like the total upper hand in any given area. I think that they could be a bit competitive given they both have a pretty strong wrestling pedigree. But I do think should they get into those firefight exchanges, I think Josh Hokit just got more intensity to him and will land the bigger shot to put Denzel Freeman out. But like I said, anything could happen. It's heavyweight. My pick's Hokit. All right, guys, we got fight number 4 on the card. A lightweight bout between the legend Michael Johnson versus Alexander the Great Ape Hernandez. Now, as I mentioned, Michael Johnson, my Gemini brother, 39 years old, turning 40 this year, 1986, represent. 5'10" with a 73.5-inch reach. 24 wins, 19 losses, 16 and 15 in the UFC, which is absolutely insane. 10 wins by way of knockout, a 42% KO rate. 2 wins by way of submission, an 8% submission rate. 12 wins by way of decision, a 50% decision rate, giving my boy Michael Johnson a 50% finishing rate overall. Now, taking a look at his losses. Johnson's lost 3 times by way of knockout, which is about 16% KO loss rate. I have no idea why it's 15.79, so my apologies there. He has 9 losses by way of submission, which is a 47% submission loss rate, and then 7 losses by way of decision, a 37% decision loss rate. Last 4 for Michael Johnson, the Unk has been successful, 3-1 in his last 4, something that Gaethje's been talking about for himself as well, former adversaries. Got a big win over Daniel Huber by way of decision, which was in December of, was that December? I guess it doesn't matter. Got the win over Zell Huber, got the win over Ataman Azatar, which is a KO, and then a win over Darius Flowers prior to that. Prior to that, a loss to Diego Ferreira in a fight where I think he was actually getting the better of Diego. Just happened to get caught by that big overhand right that put his lights out. He was out bad. Now, his adversary for this matchup, Alexander the Great Ape Hernandez, 33 years old, 5'9", with a 72-inch reach. He's 18-8 as a pro, 10-7 in the UFC, 8 wins by way of knockout, a 44% KO rate. 2 wins by way of submission, an 11% submission rate. 8 wins by way of decision, a 44% decision rate. Giving my boy, the Great Ape, a 56% finishing rate overall. Hernandez has 3 losses by way of KO, 37.5% of his losses overall. He has 1 loss by way of submission, a 13% submission loss rate, and then 4 losses by way of decision, a 50% decision loss rate. Taking a look at his last 4, 4-0. So solid work from Alexander Hernandez. He's really hit another stride in his career here. Back-to-back knockout wins, decision wins over 2 of the guys that fought it out to win, potentially win the Ultimate Fighter. And he beat them both. Now, guys, this one, as I went through these fight picks multiple times, this one, along with the Ricky Turcios fight and the Rose fight, were all kind of ones that I had to, come back to multiple times. And the reason why is because Michael Johnson, he has such fast hands still. He's still very speedy on the feet. And Hernandez, while very good, I feel like he has had those times in the past where as fights keep going, he tends to fade a bit. But what he's done very well in his last couple fights is use the footwork to set up his attacks on the feet, finding KO shots over some really formidable opponents, especially like a Chase Hooper. Getting the knockout at the very tail end of round 1 against Chase Hooper was, surprising to see because Chase Hooper, up until that point, had been on a bit of a streak himself. And ultimately, guys, the reason I ended up going with Hernandez here is if you go and break down, break down previous opponents, Hernandez has actually done pretty well against southpaws. Now, he did get knocked out by Drew Dober years ago, but in recent times, he got a KO win over Chase Hooper. He got the KO in his debut over Beneil Dariush, which was before Dariush really started taking a lot of the damage we've seen. Got a very clear knockout there, who's a southpaw. Got another win over Jim Miller, who's another southpaw. So he's done very well, I guess, historically, if you were to look at, those different matchups against those southpaws. And when you look at it that way, and you also look at the fact that although Michael Johnson did very well against Diego Ferreira before he got caught, what he got caught by was a big overhand right, which is a punch that Alexander Hernandez fancies, in addition to, some straight punches. But Alexander Hernandez fancies that overhand right. That is going to be his main weapon of choice. I think if he connects clean on Johnson, he has the power and potential to flatline him, and there's that damage there. But even if he doesn't catch him clean, I see Hernandez, although having to deal with the speed of Michael Johnson, if he can stay safe, land shots, and use his movement to stay on the outside of Michael Johnson, what I see ended up happening here is a pretty back and forth, maybe war here against these two guys. But ultimately, I see Hernandez just landing some of those bigger, more thudding, damaging shots that ultimately end up getting him the W by way of decision is what I've decided on. But like I said, guys, this one's a very close one, and I wouldn't fault anybody going the route of Michael Johnson. He has actually continued to get wins and sneaky wins over guys that a lot of people don't expect him to get wins over. So I would say just keep all of that in mind, but I do think that I'm going to lock in with Alexander Hernandez getting this done by way of decision. Fight number 5 on the card, we're going back to the flyweight division. I don't know if we're going back because I don't think there's any flyweights yet, but you know what I'm saying. We got Alex Perez versus Charles Inner G Johnson. I fucking love the Inner G Johnson. He's a dope fighter. Love that guy. Perez, 33 years old, 5'6", with a 65.5-inch reach. He is 25-9 as a pro, 7-5 in the UFC, 6 wins by way of knockout, a 24% KO rate, 7 wins by way of submission, a 28% submission rate, 12 wins by way of decision, a 48% decision rate, giving Perez a 52% finishing rate overall. He's got 2 losses by way of KO, a 22.2% KO loss rate, 5 losses by way of submission, and then 2 losses by way of decision. So 56% of his losses are subs, and another 22% of his losses are decisions. Now, his last 4 fights, he's only 1-3, had a rough go at it here, losing to the former champ in Pantoja, so not the worst loss. Lost to Muhammad Mokaev, which is also not a bad loss, considering Mokaev has kind of gone on outside of the UFC to do very well. Got the knockout win over Nicolau, which was a great win, but then lost to Tatsuro Taira. So not the greatest last 4. And actually, this is not even updated because he also lost to Almabayev. Not sure why that didn't get updated in the last 4 fights, so my apology. But Perez, as I mentioned, he would still be 1-3 in his last 4 if you look at it that way. But regardless, looking at the Inner G, Charles Johnson, 35 years old, 5'9", with a 70-inch reach. So going to have a significant height and reach advantage here. And 18-7 as a pro, 7-5 in the UFC. Inner G has 7 wins by way of knockout, which is 39% KO rate. 4 wins by way of submission, a 22% submission rate. 7 wins by way of decision, a 39% decision rate, giving Inner G a 61% finishing rate overall. Very solid for this weight class. When we look at his losses, he's only lost by way of decision, so never been finished in his career. 7 losses by way of decision, which is 100%. Last 4 for Mr. Johnson, looking very solid here in that he is 3-1 in his last 4. One of those being a KO win over Joshua Van, who is now the champion of this weight class. A win over Sumaderji by way of decision. A loss to Ramazan Temirov, who actually popped for PEDs. And then a KO win over Loney Kavanaugh, which, guys, what a shocking KO there. Like, Loney was looking great in that fight, but everyone's looking great till the Inner G puts his hands on him. And he put him out cold with a huge right hook. And guys, in this fight, what I see happening, I see Perez being competitive on the feet. We did see Perez have a good outing, actually, against Amobayev. He was actually landing some big shots there, but ends up getting caught in a sub. What I see happening in this fight is, Charles Johnson is just a great athlete overall, but I think he's also just got really great striking, really great movement on the feet as well. And also can kind of mix things up if they go to the ground. He's got great scrambles. Although Perez does have that wrestling background himself, I see Johnson just staying in there, having a competitive back and forth, maybe round 1 and 2. What I end up seeing happening, though, is Perez fading as this fight goes on. And I see Johnson taking advantage of that and finding a big shot at some point in round 3. And that's why I've gone with the energy to get it done by way of KO in round 3. That is my official prediction. But Perez is also very good, guys. Perez has some heavy hands, sneaky heavy hands too. We saw that against Matheus Nicolau. So maybe Perez catches Johnson, hurts him. I just see the energy going out there and making this fight an energy type performance where he gets the W. So shout out to Charles Johnson. My pick is him, KO round 3. All right, fight number 6 is a light heavyweight bout, 205 pounds. We've got Nikita Krylov versus Modestas, the Baltic gladiator Bukauskas. Nikita Krylov is 33 years old, 6'3", with a 77.5-inch reach, 30 wins, 11 losses as a pro. He's 11-9 in the UFC. He's got 12 wins by way of knockout, a 40% KO rate, 16 wins by way of submission, a 53% submission rate, 2 wins by way of decision, a 7% decision rate, giving him a 93% finishing rate overall. Now, Krylov's got 3 losses by way of KO, which is about 27% of his losses overall, 6 losses by way of submission, 55% of his losses overall, and then 2 losses by way of decision, an 18% decision loss rate. And for Krylov, guys, he had a very tough 2025, as you may know. Looking at his last 4, he's 2-2, taking 2 devastating KO losses back-to-back in 2025. And actually, I picked, believe it or not, in both those fights, against Dominic Reyes and against Guskov, I actually picked Dominic Reyes and Guskov to knock out Krylov, and that's exactly what happened. I think that Krylov just has, the way he advances into the striking exchanges is not ideal whatsoever. He's kind of just wide open for getting caught. Some big wins prior to that, a win over Ryan Spann, which Ryan Spann has proven in the past to be competitive with, some of the best in the light heavyweight division, and now as a heavyweight. And then a win over Volkan Ozdemir, which has aged well. But dude, I don't know how Lucas Tracy picked Krylov. I'm just gonna say it. I don't know how he picked him. Shout out to Lucas Tracy. He's officially back, it seems. His adversary, a guy I'm a big fan of, Modestas Bukauskas. 31 years old, 6'3", with a 76-inch reach. He is 19-6 as a pro, 7-4 in the UFC, 11 wins by KO, which is a 58% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 16% submission rate, 5 wins by way of decision, a 26% decision rate, giving Modestas a 74% finishing rate overall. 4 of his losses came by way of knockout, which is about 67% overall. 1 loss by submission, 17% of his losses overall, and then 1 loss by decision, which is 17% of his losses overall. Now, Modestas, in his last 4, 4-0, but I think he's on a 5-fight win streak currently. I am honestly very happy for Modestas, because if you guys know the history there, he had a tough he had a couple tough fights in the UFC initially. The last fight he had before he was released originally was against Khalil Roundtree, who stomped on his leg and injured him. The way the UFC did it is like, oh, not only did you tear your ACL, we're also cutting you, which is fucking terrible. But Modestas bounces back from that, gets 2 big wins in the regional scene, wins a belt on the regional scene, comes back to the UFC, beats Tyson Pedro, which was a huge win for him. I think he got beat by Vitor Petrino, and then after being beat by Vitor Petrino, he is now on a 5-fight win streak. So shout out to Modestas. That is very tough to bounce back from, but he has just shown an ability to, really turn things around here in his career, getting some big wins, especially big finishes over really good guys. And so I gotta say, in this matchup, I think Krylov, he's just fighting differently, guys. After being KO'd twice, I just think that this matchup is not that great for Krylov. I think Krylov's going to go out there, and, someone actually I recently saw made a good point about Krylov looking like shell-shocked. I'm sorry, I can't remember who said this, but I guys have been consuming a lot of content. So whoever said that, if you're watching this by any chance, you can comment and give yourself some credit. I just can't remember who said it, so my apologies. But I totally agree with that assessment. Krylov did not look like himself after, Perez knocked him out against Guskov, and going up against the Baltic Gladiator. I think the only way Krylov has a chance here, guys, is potentially just getting takedowns and maybe, going for a submission. But the way I see this playing out is Modestas just walking him down, catching him with some big shots, and ultimately getting the win by way of knockout. As you can see, my official prediction is Modestas Bukauskas by way of round 1 KO. Fight number 7, we are in the middleweight division, the 185-pound division that is, and we've got the return of Ateba Gautier versus Andrey Pulyaev. Now, Gautier, one of the fastest rising prospects of this division, one of the most fun to watch, the Cameroonian killer, 23 years old, 6'4", with an 81-inch reach. He's got a 9-1 professional record, 3-0 in the UFC. 8 wins by way of knockout, an 89% KO rate, 0 wins by submission, 1 win by decision, giving him the remaining 11% of his wins, an 89% finishing rate overall for Mr. Gautier. The only loss in Gautier's career came by way of decision, and it happened a long time ago. In his last 4 fights, he is clearly 4-0, but he is undefeated in the UFC, as I mentioned, with round 1 KOs in all of those bouts. His opponent, on the other hand, Andrey Pulyaev, is 28 years old, 6'4", with a 78.5-inch reach. So he's 10-3 as a pro, 1-1 in the UFC, 6 wins by way of knockout, a 60% KO rate, 2 wins by way of submission, a 20% submission rate, 2 wins by way of decision, a 20% decision rate, giving Pulyaev an 80% finishing rate overall, which is also very solid. Now taking a look at his losses, you got 3 total, 1 by way of knockout, 33% of his losses, and then 2 by way of decision, which is 67% of his losses. His last 4 fights, he is 3-1, so done pretty well. Obviously, we all saw how things went with him against CLD in London. Pretty shitty fight, if you ask me. Guys, I think Pulyaev, against Nick Klein, he gets the KO, but Nick Klein was actually kind of beating on him and dogging on him in round 1. It was just that Pulyaev kind of really got lucky that Nick Klein gassed the fuck out. Because if Nick Klein was able to not blow his wad in round 1 the way he did, and the fight continued on the way he handled round 1, Pulyaev would have got dominated. But that's not how it went. Pulyaev showed that he's got that grit, and he does have the striking ability to hurt people, put them out. The stats don't lie there. Guys, this matchup, though, I think that when you are considering the speed and power of Ateba Gautier, also a little bit more youthful, although they're both young, under 30, but I just think Ateba Gautier, in a strike-for-strike type war, he is going to get the better of his opponent, given his speed, his longer reach, and then his power as well. The way I see this one going is Gautier and Pulyaev getting into some striking exchanges. I see Gautier getting the better of him, hurting him, and probably getting the knockout in round 1, and that is my official prediction. Fight number 8 is in the bantamweight division, 135 pounds, and we've got the return of Umar Nurmagomedov versus Deiveson Figueiredo. Umar Nurmagomedov is 29 years old, 5'8", with a 69-inch reach, 19-1 as a pro, 7-1 in the UFC. He's got 2 wins by KO, an 11% KO rate, 7 wins by submission, a 37% submission rate, 10 wins by way of decision, a 53% decision rate, giving Umar a 47% finishing rate overall. His only loss was the one that we saw last year, around this time actually, a loss by way of decision to Merab Dvalishvili, the former bantamweight champion. So taking a look at that, Umar's 3-1 in his last 4. We all know the ceiling is very high for Umar Nurmagomedov. Did get caught against Bautista, but just was able to, I don't know how this guy is able to get hurt, and like with shots that would, maybe kill another human, he just bounces back up, and then just implements a strong game plan where he's able to, get the win. Now, I will say, if Umar had a 5-round fight against Mario Bautista, that would have been very bad for him. Okay? Just going to say that. It's my honest opinion. Now, against Deiveson Figueiredo, one of the legends of the flyweight division. 38 years old, 5'5", 68-inch reach. He's 25-5 as a pro, 14-5 in the UFC. 9 wins by way of knockout, a 36% KO rate. 7 wins by way of decision, a 28% decision rate. And then 9 wins by way of sub, a 36% submission rate. And then 7 wins by way of decision, a 28% decision rate, giving Figgy a 72% finishing rate overall. You love to see that. Taking a look at his losses. 2 losses by way of knockout, 40% of his losses overall. 1 loss by way of sub, which is 20% of his losses. And then 2 losses by decision, which is another 40% of his losses. His last 4 fights, he is 2-2. Now, what we've noticed, although Figgy was the marauder of the flyweight division, this guy that was just starching fools out cold in the flyweight division, it has seemed that the power from Figgy, at least in recent outings, has not really translated that well into the bantamweight division. Now, he did happen, I think, to drop Marlon Vera, which, shocking as it is, because Marlon Vera, we've seen be hit by, like I said before, shots that would kill another human. Like, remember when O'Malley kneed him to the head and it sounded like a baseball bat hitting a watermelon? When you think about that, and you know that Figgy's power doesn't necessarily translate, guys, this matchup, although Figgy's a great fighter, he's one of the legends. I just don't see anywhere he beats Umar in this matchup, guys. Unless there's like some weird fluke thing where Umar gets injured, I just don't see Figgy getting a W over Umar. I think Umar will be faster on the feet, lighter on the feet, will land some great strikes, and I see him just overwhelming Figgy in the grappling. Although Figgy is a very good grappler, has submissions himself, I see Umar just basically at his suffocating best probably against Deiveson Figueiredo. I see him getting a win by way of decision, though, because as you can see, statistically speaking, Umar's not much of a finisher. The way this fight ends up going, I think Umar stays on the outside, lands some nice, pretty, flashy kicks. Maybe he hurts Figgy on the feet, but really I think if Figgy's giving him any type of challenge on the feet, Umar is going to be primed to mix it up, get him to the ground, get that control on the ground. I hope maybe I'm wrong in my overall thought process here, but I do think it's going to end by way of decision. But I actually hope I'm wrong and that Umar goes out there, gets the better of Figgy, and maybe gets a finish, whether it be by KO or sub. But my prediction, guys, is that Umar gets this one done by way of decision. Fight number 9 on the card. I believe this is the start of the main card, guys, and I am so excited to not be exposed to random jerkmate ads while I'm trying to fucking stream these fights. And in this matchup, we've got a banger of a team between Arnold Allen and Gene Silva in the featherweight division. Arnold Allen, 32 years old, 5'8", with a 72-inch reach. Pretty long reach for this weight class. He is 20-3 as a pro, 11-2 in the UFC. He's got 7 wins by knockout, a 35% KO rate, 4 wins by sub, a 20% submission rate, 9 wins by way of decision, a 45% decision rate, giving Mr. Allen a 55% finishing rate overall. Taking a look at his losses, Arnold Allen's only lost 3 times in his career. All 3 came by way of decision losses, which is 100% of those. And his last 4, he's 2-2. Got a big win over Giga Chikadze. Prior to that, a loss to Movsar Evloev. And prior to that, a loss to the legend Max Holloway. And prior to that, a big win over Calvin Kattar. But Calvin Kattar got injured, so not much to write home there about that one. Going up against Gene Silva. Gene Silva, 29 years old, a fellow 1996 baby. Shout out to Gene Silva. 29 years old, 5'7", with a 69-inch reach. He is 16-3 as a pro, 5-1 in the UFC. He has 12 wins by way of knockout, a 75% KO rate, 3 wins by way of submission, a 19% submission rate, 1 win by way of decision, which was against Kevin Vallejos, and that's a 6% decision rate, giving Mr. Gene Silva a 94% finishing rate overall, which is fantastic, guys. That is fireworks. Now, Gene Silva's losses, he's got 3, 1 loss by way of KO, which came in his last outing against Diego Lopez, 33% of his losses overall. The other 2 losses were by way of decision, which is 67% of his losses overall. His last 4 fights, as we all know, he's 3-1. Got that KO or doctor stoppage win over Drew Dober. Got the big KO win over Melsik Bagdasarian, and then the big Bryce Mitchell submission before he did fall to Diego Lopez. I did pick Diego in that fight, but guys, this one is a tough one. Really is, because in this fight, we got Arnold Allen, who is, I would say, he's like a textbook fundamentalist. He's got all the fundamentals in the boxing down pat. Very solid, straight 1-2s. Very good with his hooks, mixing in uppercuts. He fights out of the southpaw stance as well. Uses the cross guard, so he has a lot of great aspects to his overall striking game, but then also very strong, right? Very good in these clinch situations, very good probably also should things hit the floor. I think he's just a very solid, well-rounded mixed martial artist. Now, Gene Silva, on the other hand, is a marauder, as we know, right? He's got the fucking hitman tat on the back of his neck. So Gene Silva, guys, he is one of my favorite fighters, but one thing I got to call out in this matchup that I was leaning Arnold Allen, actually, because I think Arnold Allen is very calm, cool, collected, doesn't let things get to him. And also, like I said, textbook fundamentalist, got the great boxing fundamentals, doesn't let things push him out of his comfort zone, if you will. Like, he's very good about staying even keel. Whereas Gene Silva, you got to love the guy. He is full of emotion, whether it be happiness, sadness, angry, very full of emotion. And I think that type of style, and for him, can be his downfall. Specifically against Diego Lopez, he got pretty much manhandled in round 1, goes out there in round 2 looking for the kill, as he does, but let the emotions drive his efforts, which ultimately got him caught. And that's something you got to worry about against a guy like Arnold Allen, who has proven to have pretty solid fight IQ. When you look at the fact that he's got 11 wins in the UFC, 2 losses, and those losses came by way of, a guy in Mazar Evloev who is completely undefeated, a guy who is a legend of the featherweight division in Max Holloway. I could see why people are going to lean the Arnold Allen approach. The problem that I have with picking Arnold Allen here, guys, is that he has had significant time outside the cage. Last fight being July 27th of 2024, which is a significant amount of time out of the cage. And although Gene Silva got caught and hurt by Diego Lopez, he has been a very active fighter. It's not going to be as much for him to just hop back in there and be back into the fight, even getting the fight camp and all that stuff done. I also think Gene Silva is going to be revitalized and hungry to go out there, right the wrongs of the Diego Lopez matchup. And I just see this one, honestly, although Gene Silva is a finisher through and through, the way I see this one going with Arnold Allen is being kind of a back and forth scrap. Gene Silva just getting the better of those exchanges with, his speed, his power, his diversity of attacks, right? He throws those flying knees. He's got some interesting attacks that he can mix in. And when the fighting nerds have like analytics guys who are breaking down footage of their opponents, giving them game plans. When you consider all of that, I think that Gene Silva has all of the tools here to have a back and forth like scrap with Arnold Allen. I think Arnold Allen's going to be a bit rusty probably, and maybe a bit slow to start, which is going to play in the favor of Gene Silva. Because the way I could see this one going is like Gene Silva wins round 1. Arnold Allen starts to pick things up in round 2, maybe scrapes round 2 from him, but Gene Silva kind of coming back in round 3, getting the better of him there. Or perhaps it's that Arnold Allen comes on late, Gene Silva getting the better of him in the first 2, and them having kind of a back and forth war, just because I don't think Arnold Allen is going to be a guy who is very easily finished, right? Given that he hasn't been. But I've been wrong about that before, right? So I guess you could look at it from the perspective that Gene Silva has the potential to KO Arnold Allen. I feel like the way it's going to go, though, is back and forth scrap. Gene Silva just getting the better landed shots, more damage, and ultimately getting the W by way of decision. I'm sure that actually might be worth something on the betting platforms if you guys are interested. But don't take my word for it, because you just never know. And statistically speaking, the odds are unlikely that Gene Silva gets a decision win. I just think that when I compare Arnold Allen's style and fight IQ, I think Gene Silva has the better chance of just getting this win by decision. But also Arnold Allen, guys, if he mixes up the game really well here, mixes in the takedowns, gets ground control, he has the potential to win this by a clear decision, or maybe even getting a submission over Gene Silva. But like I said, my pick, guys, I'm going Gene Silva. I think that the layoff for Arnold Allen is the one thing that took me out of putting my pick for him to win this fight. So that is what I'm going with. Could be wrong. We shall see the night of. This one will be an absolute banger, though. All right, guys. Fight number 10 is the strawweight division, 115 pounds. We got Natalia Silva versus Rose Namajunas. Thug Rose. Natalia Silva's 28 years old, 5'4" with a 65-inch reach. She is 19-5 as a pro, 7-0 in the UFC. She got 5 wins by KO, which is 26% of her wins overall. 7 wins by submission, a 37% submission rate. 6 wins by decision, a 32% decision rate, giving her a 63% finishing rate overall. Very solid, especially in this weight class. She has 1 loss by way of KO, which is 20% of her losses. She has 2 losses by submission, 40% of her losses, and then 2 losses by decision, which is another 40% of her losses. Her last 4 fights, well, as I said, she's 7-0 in the UFC, so you already know she's 4-0 in her last 4. Wins over Andrea Lee, a win over Viviane Araujo, and then a win over Jessica Andrade, and a win over Alexa Grasso. Rose, on the other hand, 33 years old, 5'5", 65-inch reach. She is 14-7 as a pro, 12-6 in the UFC. 2 wins by way of knockout, a 14% KO rate. 5 wins by submission, a 36% submission rate, and 7 wins by decision, a 50% decision rate, giving Rose a 50% finishing rate overall. Rose has 1 loss by way of knockout, which is 14% of her losses. She has 1 loss by sub, another 14% of her losses, and then 5 losses by way of decision, a 71% decision loss rate. And Rose in her last 4, 3-1. Now, I would say strength of schedule-wise, it's pretty comparable, actually, if you really break it down. Obviously, I know Rose has also fought, Jessica Andrade, where she actually was slammed in that title outing where she lost the belt, but then she came back to beat Jessica Andrade by way of a decision. A win over Tracy Cortez, the win over Miranda Maverick, which was pretty shocking. I actually picked Miranda Maverick, but I was wrong there. And then that win over Amanda Ribas. So strength of schedule-wise, I think Rose obviously has fought better talent. Like when you look at her fighting Zhang Weili 2 times, getting the KO and then a decision win over her. She got the KO over Joanna Jędrzejczyk, again, a decision win over her as well. So just strength of schedule-wise, Rose is absolutely had the better fighters, especially getting, even though she lost to Erin Blanchfield, she's at least gone up against Erin Blanchfield. And I do think that Natalia Silva is a very good fighter, guys, but I do think that a lot of people are really heavily rating her, and I think she's very good and deserves a high rating, but I don't think that in this matchup, it is the best matchup for Natalia Silva. Now, a bit short notice, not too much. I think we've known for quite some time that Natalia Silva was going to be filling in on behalf of Alexa Grasso. But the one thing that I would say is I think Natalia Silva, based on my tape review that I did, Natalia Silva, movement-wise, not very great. Like on the feet, she's pretty, straightforward, straight back. Does do a bit of circling, but really like linear footwork, linear movement. And when we watch, and if you watch the fight against Alexa Grasso, early on was, tagging up Alexa Grasso, landed some good shots. She's got a nice side kick where she landed that right on the chin of Alexa Grasso, clearly upset her. Alexa was pissed. Alexa got cut at the end. But what I noticed in that fight is Silva was pretty linear with her footwork. And that is actually, I was going with Silva at first, but after rewatching some tape, I feel like Rose is going to be very tough for Natalia Silva in the fact that Rose has some of the best footwork we've seen, very good about making opponents, come to her, find her, and finding those openings based on her footwork and countering. And I think when I watched that Natalia Silva-Alexa Grasso fight, Alexa Grasso was kind of just stagnant. And I think once Natalia Silva had really clinched the first 2 rounds, you saw Alexa Grasso really start to put on more pressure, try to walk her down, and was having success at the end. But, Natalia Silva was just able to kind of stay at range and circle out. Whereas I just think in the matchup against Rose, it's not going to be the same type of fight. Alexa Grasso did not really use footwork that well against Natalia Silva, whereas I think Rose is going to be setting up traps, constantly switching stances, using that footwork that she always does to move around the cage and pick her moments to land on Natalia Silva. I can actually see this one, and this is where I've headed with it. I see Rose actually getting a win by way of unanimous decision here, of just being the cleaner, better fighter in terms of fight IQ. Natalia Silva does have that ability to land some of those unique shots, right? The side kick, she's got good leg kicks. If she can, really hurt Rose to the legs maybe early on and slow that movement down, then I think Natalia Silva has a very good chance of winning. But my opinion is that Rose is going to make it a tougher fight by making Natalia Silva have to work to land those shots and get into those exchanges, because Rose's footwork is going to keep her away from Natalia Silva. So my ultimate pick decision is a decision, and a decision going to Rose, Thug Rose Namajunas. All right, guys, fight number 11. We're back in the big boy division. Heavyweight 265. We got Waldo Cortes Acosta versus Derek the Black Beast Lewis. This is going to be a fun one, guys. So, Cortes Acosta, 34 years old, 6'4", with a 78-inch reach. He is 16-2 as a pro, 9-2 in the UFC, 8 wins by way of knockouts, 50% of his wins overall, 1 win by sub, which is 6% of his wins, and then 7 wins by way of decision, which is 44% of his wins, giving Cortes Acosta a 56% finishing rate overall. Not the greatest when you're considering it's a heavyweight fighter. But when we look at his losses, Cortes Acosta's lost twice in his career. Both of those came by way of decision. His last 4 fights, doing really well, right? 3-1 in his last 4. Only loss came by way of Sergey Pavlovich, a guy that's actually beat now both Cortes Acosta and Derek Lewis. Taking a look at the Black Beast, 40 years old, 6'3", with a 79-inch reach, 29-12, 20-10 in the UFC. He's got 24 wins by way of KO, 83% of his wins. You know he is the knockout king. I think he's got 20-something actual knockouts in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's 20 wins by way of KO. I can't remember. 1 win by sub from Derek Lewis, 3% of his wins overall. 4 wins by decision, 14% of his wins overall, giving Mr. Black Beast an 86% finishing rate. Now, taking a look at Derek Lewis and his losses, right? So he's got 7 losses by way of knockout, which is 58% of his losses. 2 losses by sub, 17% of his losses, and then 3 losses by decision, which is 25% of his losses. His last 4, he's also 3-1. Got the big win over Taliesin Teixeira. I know a lot of people wanted to say that was an early stoppage, but Taliesin was pretty hurt. Then he got a KO win over Rodrigo Nascimento. And then before that, he basically got laid on by Gelton Almeida for I think 3 rounds, 3 to 5 rounds or something like that. And then a KO win over Marco Rogerio de Lima. Guys, this one was a tough one for me because I think Derek Lewis, as I mentioned, and you've seen it in the stats, you've seen it in the fights, he just has that one-hit-a-quitta type power. But Waldo Cortes Acosta has one of the best chins that I think I've seen in heavyweight. Like, I don't even know if Cortes Acosta's even been dropped before. Very solid chin. Now, we've seen solid chins get checked, right? But in this matchup, what I end up seeing happening here is that although I love Derek Lewis, and I'm going to be rooting for Derek Lewis, I just think that Cortes Acosta is a bit more tricky on the feet at this point. You know, he has that pitching background, which really allows him to wind up that overhand in a way that is very different for guys to catch onto and ultimately get caught by. So the way I see this one going is these two kind of getting into those striking exchanges early on in round 1. If no one gets starched out in round 1, the way I see it happening is Derek Lewis maybe, blowing his wad a little bit too much in round 1. I see Cortes Acosta just catching Derek Lewis with a big overhand right, and then, landing some follow-up shots, they win by way of KO in round 2. That is my official prediction. But like I said, guys, Derek Lewis has all the potential to really check the chin of Cortes Acosta and maybe even give him his first loss by way of KO. You can never count the Black Beast out. It's just, I think at this point, being 40, also last 4 fights, when you really break it down, like he only had 1 fight in 2025. He did get tagged by Taliesin kind of first exchange. I don't know if he was, feinting for Taliesin to kind of step in and then land a big shot, but he did get tagged in the eye. And so I don't know. It's a tough one, but I do think Cortes Acosta just having the more activity, being a bit younger here, also having the really solid boxing fundamentals. I see Cortes Acosta getting a win by way of KO, and I said round 2. So that is my pick. All right, guys. Fight number 12, which is now the co-main event because Kayla Harrison unfortunately had a neck injury. She had to pull out. We got Sean O'Malley, shout out Arizona, versus Song Yadong. Sean O'Malley, although some people might think it's cringy, I thought he had a great announcement for this fight. He doesn't beat his dong, but he's going to beat Yadong. O'Malley's 31, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. He's 18-3 as a pro, 10-3 in the UFC. He has 11 wins by KO, a 61% KO rate, 2 wins by sub, an 11% submission rate, 5 wins by decision, a 28% decision rate, giving O'Malley a 72% finishing rate overall, which you'll love to see at bantamweight. O'Malley's got 3 losses as a pro. One of those losses by KO, which was, obviously it was the Chito Vera loss. Prior to that, then a loss by way of submission, which just happened in his last outing against Nurmagomedov, and then one loss by way of decision also came from Nurmagomedov. Taking a look at Sean's last 4 fights, we all know, he's 2-2, got the win for the belt over Aljo, then he beat the piss out of Chito Vera, and then he lost to Merab twice. So Sean's in a weird spot here, definitely needs to get a W. His opponent, Song Yadong, 28 years old, 5'8" with a 67-inch reach. So Sean is going to have a lot of those advantages when it comes to the length in terms of height and reach. Yadong is 22-8 as a pro, 11-3 in the UFC. He's got 9 wins by way of knockout, a 41% KO rate, 3 wins by submission, a 14% submission rate, and then 10 wins by decision, a 45% decision rate, giving Song Yadong a 55% finishing rate overall. Yadong's got 2 losses by KO, which is 25% of his losses, and then 5 losses by way of decision, 63% of his losses. Not sure why that's not mathing there. 8 losses. Weird. Regardless, last 4 for Yadong were 3-1. Got the loss to Petr Yan, but then wins over Henry Cejudo, a win over Chris Gutierrez, and then a win over Ricky Simon. So this fight's interesting, guys, because I think that I'm fancying Sean O'Malley, as you can see. I see Sean O'Malley staying at range, keeping it a pretty fight with the striking, landing shots, and kind of weaving in and out. Maybe Yadong, making this competitive, though, landing some big shots of his own. I don't see Yadong knocking Sean out. There is that potential, though, because Yadong does have some power in his hands. The one thing that I'm worried about in this matchup, actually, though, is Yadong having that close, tight-knit relationship with the team alpha male. I think he still trains out of there. He's likely to have a lot of grappling to his game that I would worry about here against Sean, because if Yadong goes out there with a grappling heavy game plan, he could potentially get a big upset over Sean O'Malley, because we've seen Sean O'Malley struggle with the grappling, especially against Merab. Now, Merab and Yadong are not the same fighter, though. So what I see happening in this fight is, especially because Yadong really kind of, when we look at his fight against Henry Cejudo, kind of stood there, stood right in front of him and traded. I worry about that for Yadong against O'Malley, because I feel like if he is standing in front of O'Malley in any means, giving O'Malley a chance to land that sniper right hand that he has, I just see the way this one goes is these two trade. Sean has every potential to flatline KO Song Yadong, but given that Yadong just, we haven't seen him get KO'd, I don't think very often, or even in the UFC. I'd have to look back, but I do know that Sean has that potential to land that kill shot. The way I see this one going, though, is this one kind of being a back-and-forth war. Sean O'Malley just getting the better of the striking exchanges. And ultimately, my official pick is Sean O'Malley, in a 3-round bout, getting a decision by way of unanimous decision, just winning in those striking exchanges, probably landing more often and with the cleaner shots. So that's my official pick, O'Malley by way of decision. All right, Fite Feeders, if you made it this far, thank you. We are officially at the end of UFC 324 main event for the interim lightweight belt, and this matchup between Justin Gaethje, or as he says, Gaethjes, if you need to know how to pronounce it, versus Patrick the Paddy Pimblett. Guys, what a banger of a fight. Although I know us hardcore fans all know, Armand should be in this matchup. It doesn't matter, right? Because it's still going to be fun. So Justin Gaethje is 37 years old, 5'11" with a 70-inch reach. He is 26-5 as a pro, 9-5 in the UFC, 19 wins by way of knockout, a 73% KO rate, 2 wins by way of sub, an 8% submission rate, 5 wins by way of decision, a 19% decision rate, giving Mr. Gaethje a 81% finishing rate overall. Now, Gaethje's got 5 losses. 3 of those came by way of KO, which is 60% of his losses. He's got 2 losses by submission, which is another 40% of his losses. He's never been defeated by way of decision. Last 4 fights, as Gaethje has said, 3-1 in his last 4. We did see, I'm wearing my hat, 300. I forgot about that. Shit. Gaethje got KO'd there. It's very sad to see. Now, Gaethje's opponent, Paddy Pimblett, 31 years old, 5'10" with a 73-inch reach. Paddy is 23-3 as a pro, 7-0 in the UFC. He's got 6 wins by way of knockout, a 26% KO rate, 11 wins by way of submission, a 48% submission rate, 6 wins by decision, a 26% decision rate, giving Mr. Paddy Pimblett a 74% finishing rate overall, which just tells you on paper this is set to be a fight that is going to have some fireworks. Now, as Paddy has said, scalpers don't get knocked out, never been KO'd. But he does have 1 loss by way of submission. It's 33% of his losses. And then the other 2 losses are by way of decision, 67% of his losses. Now, as I have already said, never tasted defeat in the UFC. His last 4 fights, although he should have 3-1 in his last 4 because he definitely lost to Jared Gordon. We all know that. But got the win over Tony Ferguson. Not much to write home about on that one. The big sub over King Green, which was a good one. And then a big win over Michael Chandler. And now, guys, I did not pick Paddy against Chandler. I thought Chandler would land a big shot, maybe put him out. Was wrong. But I also thought it would be a Chandler that was more aggressive and more able to close the distance. But Paddy did a great job off the bat, just picking apart Chandler at range with those leg kicks that I think really changed the course of the fight for Chandler. Now, in this matchup, guys, it's not going to be the typical matchup that Paddy's had, right? Now, it is going to be typical in that, his last several opponents are aging fighters, right? Tony Ferguson, I think, was 40. King Green, almost 40. Michael Chandler, almost 40. And now Gaethje, almost 40. So a little bit actually like his previous opponents. But Gaethje's a bit of a taller fighter. He's going to be taller than Paddy, which I don't think Ferguson nor King Green were taller, of course. So that is an aspect that Gaethje's going to bring here that's going to be a bit different. Now, I didn't pick Paddy, like I said, in the Chandler fight. I did walk away from the Chandler fight feeling like, okay, I feel like I've really doubted Paddy the Baddy and time to not doubt him anymore. But after rewatching the Chandler fight, guys, I was not as impressed. I think Paddy did a great job, but the reason I was not as impressed is, like I said, I feel like rewatching it, Chandler just didn't look like Chandler in the sense that he was unable to close the distance really at all. And just that's a testament to Paddy's ability to pick the legs apart. I don't think Paddy has the potential to do that. Paddy has been saying he's going to stand with Gaethje. He wants to KO him. And so I guess Paddy does have that potential to hurt Gaethje to the legs, but I do think that the way this fight goes is Paddy is likely to trade with Justin. And if this is prime Justin, if this is Justin that we know who can go out there, stay locked in to the flow state, I think if it's the Justin that can go out there, stay locked in the flow state, and stay off the ground, this is a Justin Gaethje masterclass maybe, where he's able to just pick Paddy apart and then land some big shots. Maybe not KO him, but just win in the striking exchanges. But the problem that I have is Gaethje, when he gets hurt, it's like caution goes to the wind. He goes for it after that. And so I think if Paddy is able to land a big shot that hurts Gaethje, we could see Gaethje kind of get into that state of just throwing caution to the wind and going out on the shield, right? You win or lose. And what I worry about is that Paddy has such an elite ground game to a point where I can see Paddy catching Gaethje in some type of exchange where he's able to get the fight to the ground and just getting him in some type of sub. Now, like I said, Paddy's been out there talking about how he wants to stand with Gaethje, he wants to knock him out. There's potential for that because Gaethje, if there's one thing that I would say about Gaethje's game at this point, it's just that his chin has had a lot of mileage, and that opens up opportunities for Paddy to land a big shot. But when it comes to just straight striking, if Gaethje's locked in, I think Gaethje is going to really land on Paddy. And the thing is, the other thing I would say about the Paddy-Chandler fight is that Paddy has not, based on that fight, fixed those defensive flaws, right? We saw the defensive flaws against Gordon. He said he was going to fix that. But when you go and watch the Chandler fight, Paddy's hands were down, chest level, not even close to his face, head right on the center line to be picked off, right? And that is something that you have to be extremely worried about going up against a guy in Justin Gaethje who has that type of power that could really change the course of the fight if he's able to land flush and hurt Paddy. Regardless, I think if all things go according to plan, right, whoever wins this fight gets to go up against Topuria next. If Paddy wins this fight, which my official prediction, guys, is that although I'll be rooting for Gaethje through and through, the American shares the same initials as me, I got to go for my guy Gaethje. But I do think if I'm using my brain in terms of just the mileage on the clock, the ability to mix it up, I think Paddy is more dangerous in that regard, and that is why I am actually picking Paddy to get a sub by way of whatever sub he gets him in round 3. But like I said, if it all goes according to plan, if Paddy does, it's not my plan that Paddy wins. I'm hoping that Justin wins because that would just be great because then Paddy would really have to go back to the drawing board, maybe fight like an Armand or who knows. But if Paddy ends up winning and going up against Topuria, he's got to show us that he's fixed that chin thing because that whole Scousers don't get KO'd. I don't think that that's going to work against Topuria, dude. I really don't. But like I said, my official pick is Paddy by way of submission in round 3. We got to root for Gaethje, guys. Gaethje has every opportunity to catch Paddy, put him out, put the lights out. It would be an amazing win if he's able to do that. But I just think Paddy's going to be able to mix things up a bit too much to the point where he'll have a better chance of winning the fight is really what it breaks down to. So I hope you guys enjoyed my predictions for UFC 324 happening T-Mobile Arena on January 24, 2026. I am very excited for 2026. I hope you guys are as well. Make sure you guys comment any of your thoughts below. Give the video a like. Subscribe to Fite Feeds so you could stay on top of more of my prediction videos, but also the other content that I'm posting. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Love you guys, and I will see you in the next one.